And we are back. So, yeah, earlier you mentioned that in 1948, your family had to leave Jaffa. And you were 11 years old, and your family fled to Lebanon, and eventually you settled in the U.S. So this year, 1948, this is not a coincidence.
No, it was the year of the, let's say, the war when between Palestinian resistance and colonial settler invasion, I would say, of Israelis. At that time, not Israelis, Jews, promoted by Britain and supported by Britain, and probably would not have succeeded had it not been the entry immediately at that point of the U.S. with a lot of funding, seeing the great advantage of having influence in that area through subverting Jewish dreams of safety. But at the time we left, there were a lot of Jewish gangs that were very terrorist. It was a dangerous situation. I remember collecting bullet heads from the roof next door of a big balcony that was part of the new house my father had built, and bringing them to my father to look at. It was a scary time. I remember one day my father coming home with blood all over, and we were all hustled out of the way until the sights were okay for us to see, etc. I mean, then my father took us out and returned. Eventually, people that he had been friends with and he'd worked with from the Jewish side took over everything. Friendships that were friendships before suddenly were not friendships, and we lost everything. And it was devastating, more devastating for my father. I was young and I didn't really understand enough, but understood more and more as you begin to see the great pain the adults are going through. So as I watched what's going on in Gaza, I was fortunate at the time. I know there were horrors elsewhere, but my situation was a more fortunate one in that my father took us out, but by air. And then he returned, and he had to escape by car through the Galilee under attack. It was a difficult time.
Yeah. Your family are one of the many who were affected by the Nakba.
When they talk about the Nakba, they don't realize that what happened is that the vast majority of Palestinians who were pushed out of their homes did not leave Palestine proper. They were just pushed out, so the Israelis would just carve out a section, and then they took more than the UN supposedly gave them, and they were highly armed by foreigners. And our side had very, very heroic people, but very poorly armed.
Yeah, there's a big power vacuum. Yeah, still is. Yeah. How has that affected your work as an artist and also as an activist for Palestinian liberation?
As an artist, I've been asked many times, where is Palestine in your art? And I took the question seriously and I thought about it carefully, because in a revolutionary period, everybody is anxious to and request that everybody in the community help, which is proper. And that's what happens in revolution. You have a lot of people who are all of one mind, going in one place. So questions arose in my mind of what was proper and what can art do for to help a situation. And really, art cannot do very much if it's explorative art. If it's documentary art, it can document, and we need to document. That's our duty and our responsibility.
Yeah.
But it can also be political art. But that's not going to invent new methods in art, but that's going to use the knowledge we have to create the images and the posters. But more than that, we have a responsibility to talk. So, for example, I have a responsibility to talk today about what I know and what I experience as you interview me. But my art does not have to contain that. When you come to see my performance, I'm still the intellect that I that I am, and I'm still the questioner of what's proper in art. And when people insist, I always ask them, if you have a doctor, do you want them to limit themselves just to Palestinian medicine, or do you want them to be international in their knowledge?
That's an interesting question, but okay, yeah.
So, you want a technician who comes and helps you fix your computer. You want them to know everything.
Yeah.
So yes. The other thing I want to mention here that's important is that unfortunately our leadership is as incapable as the leadership of most governments, probably including the one we're living under.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Right
yes,
now.
Feel free to give us your hot takes. I have a bunch, but it's totally outside of the scope of today's show. But yes, very much agreed. Yeah.
So that's no different with the Palestine Authority. The Palestine Authority used to be the PLO, and it should have stayed outside, but came in, and they were bought, and they were they're really defective. So the Palestinians are really sort of self-guided, and there are things we understand just intuitively, just because we've all shared the same experience. We're all determined that we continue, regardless. This is our country, our land. We continue our work, we continue learning, we continue practicing regardless. But at the same time, we will speak out and resist.
Hear her, yeah. On the note of what you said, documentation, the role of documentation artists and art could do, I would love to talk to you about the drawing series you did of the Kafr Qasim massacre in 1956. And it's very closely related to what we talk about, the Nakba as well. So I know you conducted several interviews with survivors that informed your drawings. Could you share with us what sorts of stories you heard?
There was one interview that was extremely moving, and it was a man with his brother. His brother had been sent to get him from the field. There was just in very brief, the whole setup was that it happened on the day that Israel, with Britain and France, had decided to invade and retake the Suez Canal, which they failed to do. So in the cover smokescreen of that, they decided to expand Israel. And so there was a triangle of land ceded to them by King Hussein of Jordan that they decided to empty of the people that are living in it, ethnic cleanse it. So they declared a curfew to occur at 6 o'clock or 5, and it was announced to the villagers only 20 minutes in advance. And most villagers were out in the field. And this man's brother had been sent to get him. They were coming back, and the man had been a foreman and felt that he knew the Israeli soldiers and could talk his way through the situation. And they were coming back in a truck. The soldiers told them to come down and line them up, execution style. And he was showing his ID to the soldiers. And his son calls him over, father, bring me down from the truck, because those trucks were very high. And he went to get his son. They shot the whole group. He dropped his son. The son died, and he managed to escape. But it goes on and on. How I was brought into the situation was a daughter of the village had seen my internet stories about Palestine, and she contacted me. We became friends. She took me to Kafr Qasim. She took me to every house of all her sisters, her many sisters, and I began to hear the stories, and it was very compelling. She said every artist who's Palestinian should make one painting about this, but the minute I started learning about it, it was like it grew and grew and grew and became very compelling. This was 1956. It wasn't 48. These people were supposed to be citizens of the most democratic, quote-unquote, country in the region. And they simply killed them execution style, coming home from work, having no arms, nothing. They just wanted to scare as many, kill as many, and then they forced them to stay home. It was a nightmare. They forced them to stay home. They didn't let them out. They buried their dead for them, and when they came out and were finally able to come and try and bury their dead, they were guarded by the very soldiers who had done the killing. Imagine trying to rebury people, and the killers are standing there. I did the drawings. It grew and grew. First I did a web page, then I did the book.
Yeah.
They want to tell their story. Every time I go, they're very friendly, and they tell me more. They're more welcoming and more forthcoming than they are with the press. They want to tell the story, but at the same time, the pain is still there.
Yeah.
It doesn't go away.
It doesn't. Yeah.
And the same as 1948, the pain doesn't go away. When you have a community and you tear it up, all the relationships people have had with each other, they don't just dissolve in thin air. People still want to be in contact with their relatives, with their old friends. They want to know what is happening. And it becomes really very trying. The more life goes on, the more difficult my parents were finding it. And myself too. I find that those who would have been my community are the people I want to be with, that I know would have been my community, my fellow Palestinian artists, for example. So that's what got me into it. And also I have another documentary series, which is the olive trees.
Yes.
The olive trees get treated by the Israelis the same way they treat the Palestinians. They chop them, they steal them, they put them in their gardens, and they say, look, we've been here 2,000 years ago, because the trees that Palestinians grew are growing now in their gardens. They uproot them, they throw them aside when they're building the wall, and Palestinians come and take them into their homes and they plant them properly. It's a whole science to how to do it. And they're like refugee trees. In the Intifada, they chop the tree off, like beheading it, so after centuries of giving olives, it becomes useless.
I learned very, very deeply that whenever occupation, oppression, and colonialism is present, so will resistance.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think people forget that to apply a single standard, not a double standard, to the situations. Palestinians have a right to defend themselves, and when they do, it's glorious, not a crime. It should happen. Everybody who's oppressed should. The funny thing is, in America, when they talk to anyone who's abused in the family, they say something. In the subway, if you see something, say something. Here, but only Palestinians are not allowed to say something.
I lived in Brooklyn for a while, so that is, put it out there. Yes, it's like, why? There's so much double standards. And yes, I said what I said. I'm just going to put it out there very clearly. And I think, personally, it's very important for people to learn and to talk about brutality, especially, coming back to art a little bit. As a kid, I find that, for example, this is my personal romantic view of, for example, Japanese woodblock paintings. Like the empty spaces are so interesting. And I feel like in a metaphorical way, the empty spaces, what is usually missing, it sometimes tells you more of the story than what is present or what is allowed to be present. Switching gears a little bit, coming back to what brought you to Taipei, Taiwan this year. So the 2023 Taipei Biennial. And also your digital paintings were created this is shared by you, with the same aesthetic intent as oil paintings. I'm so fascinated. How do you do this, and what does the process entail?
Well, if painting has three parts to it. There's the content, which can be then subdivided to subject matter, meaning, an actual story. But what's the meaning of the story? And then there is materials. But there's something in the middle that nobody ever talks about, which is very unpopular recent times.
Okay.
And that's the language, the visual language of art.
Yes.
The visual language of painting.
Yeah. Reem talked about this a lot, and I really enjoyed that,
The visual language of painting is, it does not matter what the material is. This is one of the Western capitalist prejudices. We say painting, and we think if it's not pigment on canvas, therefore it's not a painting. Well, it's maybe the words, we got in the habit of using the words, so I started using the word picture. You know, if it's oil on canvas, it's a picture. If it's marble, inlaid marble, it's a picture. If it's a cloisonné, it's a picture. If it's a marble inlay in a mosque in Jerusalem, it's a picture.
Yeah, you shared earlier that you actually prefer people refer you as a picture maker than a painter, because it's a wider it's a wider space for people to imagine what you do than versus a painter.
Yeah. And in abstraction, the language has importance because we're trying to make abstract paintings without images in them, and the language changes. And this is what is useful for mankind. The subject matter is not useful, it's interesting. You know, we have Renaissance subject matter that's religious, and Chinese subject matter in the Middle Ages that's religious, and sometimes it's about, you know, data and what gifts were given to the king and so on in ancient Egypt, etc. Well, you know, but perspective is not subject matter. Perspective is a language that was useful. Color division is a language that's useful, so on. So if you want new content, you have to have a new container. So we want to go to the future. So if we are to develop as human beings, and that's the whole push of mankind, is to grow. If we want to grow, we have to have a new container for our growth.
Yeah, so to give listeners a more vivid picture, pun intended, is it all started with the first Amiga computer you got when you were younger. You used computer programming to quote-unquote paint. And I learned from curator Reem Shadid that what inspired you to use keyboard and computer in your picture making is you want to jam with your friends. And on that note, like, I have many friends who are jazz musicians. So like when I heard this, I'm so fascinated. So could you tell us more?
Yes, the first programs I did were on the Amiga, and I programmed the sound. So it was all very interesting, and sometimes I think it's the most advanced thinking in painting I did. But then when I'd go to the conferences, I see the musicians jamming after the conference is over. It's late night, they're sitting on the stage, it's all noodles of black wires like over there. And I thought, now if I write a program, I could jam with them, but image to music. So I switched. That was about.
You can be in the picture.
So I switched and started reprogramming the keyboard. One of the things that was really annoying was.
Yes, tell us.
Was the corporations and how they make it impossible to. Even plugs are different.
Oh yeah, we talk about this. Yeah.
Everything has to be different, and you're constantly having to.
They just want to make money. I'm just like.
I know.
I feel very strongly that since the very beginning of your career, I feel that you have been so open and you've explored and evolved so much as well. So now, nearly 87 years in your life, what do you look forward to? And not only as an artist, but also as Samia, as a human.
When you learn something, you have a responsibility to share it, a social responsibility. We are social beings. I have so many projects that I should be completing. I'd like to write some more, and I would like to try and modernize the program I started and make a few more paintings. And really, my interest is focused on the art I make and the thinking I've done and reporting all that. And that's what I hope to spend my remaining years doing. Well, the last thing I will share with you, and because it keeps coming up to me all the time, is the creative process, how difficult it is to capture. When you focus your mind on something, you think and think and think about it, and then somehow you put it aside. You can't help it. It comes back. It becomes your knowledge. It's part of your expression, part of your talking. Like right now, just to switch on you, and I'll be very brief. Right now, because of everything that's going in Gaza, and because I've been focusing on it, every time I see a child, I want to cry almost, because I see them with their parents. And I'm quickly reminded.
Yeah, you're not alone. Yeah.
of the horrors that we've been subjected to,
Yeah.
that the beautiful people of Gaza have been subjected to. So it keeps coming. So just to jump back into the creative process, when you learn something, it's in you and you can't help it. Your brain, against your will process it, and it becomes part of your sensations, your talk. And at the same time, it mixes with a lot of ancient experience we had from childhood. I remember my grandmother's garden,
memories
the fish pond, the shapes of the fish and somehow you let it all cook together, but it is like an interaction between what you focus on and you study and what is remembered, and allowing the brain to express itself in a way, intuitively, mixing intuitive with study, and then trusting your mind to use that study, not to force it onto what you're doing.
Oh, you put it so beautifully. I wish we have like 3-4 hours that we can talk on and on. But like to wrap up today's conversation, I watched a video portrait of you that was done in 2019, I believe, and it moved me to tears. Many things, and also you talked about the fact that the art world and also what you experienced in New York when you first arrived, and also in a way now that it's just not friendly for Arab artists, especially for Palestinian artists. As you talk about art as a resistance to propaganda and to the atmosphere of the society. You put it beautifully. You talk about how your art is of memories, of colors, and also of the beauty you see in the world, despite whatever. There's just so much brutality and atrocities going on, but you still find the light not only in you, but also for people who might be just searching the light in a way.
This is very important. To be an activist, to hope to change the world in the future, you have to be an optimist. And if you're not an optimist, how can you see the beauty in the world? Even you look at the people of Gaza and all the suffering, you can't help but admire the amazing social relations they have. I heard a man talking to people as they're walking in that high road leaving the south. He was saying, if you don't have a house, we're open to share with you. Come, you can stay with us.
Yeah, I've seen this,
So it's tragic, but I think the people have demonstrated something really precious and valuable for our future.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And I follow many reporters from Gaza, and those are still with us. Personally, I feel it's so frustrating. But again, we'll come back to the optimistic part because we're gonna wrap up this interview. But it's for me, it's frustrating and mind-boggling in an ironic way is how some people just cannot seem to see the humanity in other human beings who are just like us, flesh and blood, have hopes and dreams, have our favorite breakfast food. And the way you talk about that, to be an activist and to really to live is to be optimistic. It reminded me of a very recent interview I did with a guest, Omar Oshogre. He is from Syria, and he was imprisoned and tortured under the Assad regime for not doing anything and for peacefully protesting their authoritarian government. And he went through so much horror, but also he is one of the most full of light person you will ever meet. And it rings so true that you've seen through darkness, light, and you would be a light for people. And that is, I couldn't really put into words properly, but I think you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yes, but I want to add something very, very down to earth here. Yes. I am a leftist, and I see it from analyzing things from that point of view. It's very difficult, I know, to add that in here at this very last moment.
Don't go back.
We have to remember to what capitalism has done to some people, how it's twisted them, and that there will be a future if we keep looking at it, and certainly it will have to be a working class revolution, and I look for that to be the case, and I hope that for that to be the case. And this is why it is so beautiful to connect internationally. Yeah. I mean, because we have to understand that national divisions and borders and boundaries
they're human-made.
Do not define us. You know, that's what you were saying.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's hard to make it all very brief at the last minute. But thank you for the invitation and for your sentiments. That was really nice to hear.
The pleasure is mine, Samia. Samia, thank you so much for sparing time here with us, here with me. And I cannot wait to see your exhibits and your work. And yeah, I do frequent New York City quite a lot. So hopefully we can meet up there again. And we'll love to see your studio, and all the best. And I will keep on following your work. And thank you for being you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.